My name's Daniel, I'm 28, and this happened just over a year ago. It was the last Thanksgiving I ever spent with my extended family, at least, the last one I'll ever willingly attend. You know that feeling when you walk into a room, and it's like everyone's been talking about you just seconds before you arrived? Yeah, that feeling. Multiply it by 100, add some laughter that dies a little too fast, and sprinkle in a few side eyes from cousins you once shared bunk beds with. That's the energy I stepped into when I drove 3 hours to my Aunt Carol's house for what I thought would be just another awkward, mildly tense family gathering. I wasn't prepared for what it would become. Now, a little backstory. My grandfather, Richard, was the patriarch of the family, the kind of man who wore suspenders with actual purpose, had a laugh that could fill a church hall, and taught me how to play chess and change a tire before I hit double digits. He practically raised me. My mom passed when I was 6, and Dad wasn't in the picture, so Grandpa stepped in without hesitation. We lived together up until I left for college, and even after that, I called him weekly, visited often, and helped him out with groceries and appointments when his knees started giving out. I wasn't his favorite grandson, or anything. He didn't play favorites, but I was the one who stuck around when the others drifted off. And they did drift off, especially my Aunt Carol and her kids. Carol is, well, imagine the queen bee of a high school who never grew out of that energy. Always in control, always knows what's best, always has to be right. Her son Brad, 32, personal trainer with the IQ of a houseplant and the ego of a B-list celebrity, moved to Miami years ago and only visited when there was something in it for him. Her daughter Ashley is a little better, but she takes after her mom in ways she doesn't even realize. Passive-aggressive compliments, performative kindness, that kind of thing. My other aunt, Judy, is quieter, more reserved, and tends to follow Carol's lead to avoid conflict. I think she's scared of her, honestly. Grandpa passed in late October, peacefully in his sleep, after watching an old Western and half-finishing a bowl of Rocky Road. I was the one who found him. I'd swung by to drop off some soup and noticed the TV was still on and his glasses were resting on his chest like they always were when he dozed off. Only this time, he didn't wake up. I called 911, then called Carol and Judy. It was quiet on their end, and for a moment, I thought maybe they were going to handle it with grace. I was wrong. The funeral planning was tense. Carol immediately took over like she was the CEO of grief, barking out orders, deciding what Grandpa would have wanted based on assumptions instead of facts. When I gently reminded her that Grandpa and I had talked extensively about what he wanted, no open casket, no big church service, just something small with his favorite jazz record playing, she waved me off like I was an intern interrupting a board meeting. Daniel, honey, I know you meant well, but your grandfather was a traditional man, she said, flipping through flower arrangements like she was picking out centerpieces for a wedding. He would want a proper send-off. I knew arguing would go nowhere, so I kept my mouth shut. I let her run the show, even when she ordered a tacky mahogany coffin that cost more than my used Honda and insisted on a priest Grandpa had never met. I handled the parts she didn't care about, making sure Grandpa's favorite sweater was folded neatly in the casket with him, burning a CD of his favorite jazz tracks to play after the service, and writing the eulogy because nobody else wanted to. I still have a copy of it. He deserved better than what they gave him. A week after the funeral, I got a call from Grandpa's lawyer. Turns out Grandpa had rewritten his will 2 months before he passed. He'd named me the executor and asked that I deliver the reading of the will personally, in front of the family. His exact words were, "You'll know when the moment's right." Trust me. At first, I didn't know what that meant. Deliver it personally? Who does that anymore? But he was old-fashioned like that. No emails. No letters in the mail. He wanted his wishes heard out loud. Thanksgiving came fast, and for reasons I still can't quite explain, I decided to go. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted to feel like I still had a family. Maybe I just wanted to see what Carol would do next, because part of me knew something was coming. I arrived around 3 p.m., bottle of a drink in one hand and a very important manila envelope tucked safely in my jacket. The vibe was off from the second I stepped inside. People stopped talking the moment I walked in. My cousin Brad raised his beer in a lazy, mocking salute. Aunt Carol gave me a once-over and said, "Oh, you made it. Thought you might be too busy playing martyr to show up." I blinked. Good to see you too." The dinner was worse. Carol and Brad dominated the conversation, laughing loud and long at stories that weren't funny, all while throwing little jabs at me in between bites of turkey. Ashley asked if I was still doing that sad little office job, and Brad joked about how I probably lived in a basement with my chessboard and canned soup. Judy just kept her head down, sipping her drink like she was trying to melt into her chair. And then came the moment. We were halfway through dessert when Carol clinked her glass like she was giving a wedding toast. All right, I have a fun idea, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Let's vote. Is Daniel even part of this family anymore? Laughter erupted. Not from everyone, but enough to make my stomach twist. Brad hooped like he'd just heard the best joke in the world. Ashley covered her mouth like she knew it was mean but couldn't help herself. Judy stared at her pie. I didn't argue. I didn't even speak. I just stood up, walked outside, and sat in my car for a minute, hands shaking, heart pounding. That was the moment. That was what Grandpa meant. I could feel it. I went back in, calm, quiet, envelope in hand. The laughter stopped instantly. I have something to read, I said. My voice was steady. I don't even know how. It's from Grandpa. Carol narrowed her eyes. What are you talking about? I sat down at the end of the table, opened the envelope, and unfolded the will. I was instructed to deliver this personally. Grandpa's final wishes. You could hear a pin drop, and as I began to read, the smiles started to fade. Carol's expression morphed from smug amusement to something sharper, like a teacher who just realized the student she mocked is reading directly from the principal's notes. Brad leaned back in his chair, trying to act like he didn't care, but I caught the twitch in his jaw. Ashley reached for her glass. Judy still hadn't looked up. I took my time. Grandpa's lawyer had written it all out clearly, but it was Grandpa's voice I heard in my head. I could picture him writing it, probably late at night in his favorite recliner, that little brass lamp on beside him, the smell of old books and cedar hanging in the air. To my grandson Daniel, I read aloud, keeping my voice even, who stayed by my side, not because he had to, but because he chose to. I leave my home, my savings, my car, and all personal possessions contained therein. Carol choked on her drink. To my daughter Carol, I continued, my eyes flicking up to meet hers just for a second, who always knew better than me, even when she didn't. I leave a single dollar and the knowledge that arrogance is its own inheritance. Silence. Ashley muttered. What? To my granddaughter Ashley, I read, I leave the set of encyclopedias she admired as a child. May she one day learn the value of things that don't sparkle. Brad laughed, until I turned to the next line. To my grandson Bradley, who showed up late to birthdays, early for handouts, and never once brought a dish to dinner, I leave the tools in the garage. I hope he learns to build something with his hands, since talk is all he's mastered. I glanced up. Brad's face had gone red. He's joking, right? He said. That's not real. Carol stood. Daniel, stop this right now. I looked at her, calm. It's notarized. Signed. Witnessed. Dated. Grandpa made this 2 months ago. He wanted me to read it in front of the whole family. She was seething now. This is a joke. My father would never, your father, I said, knew exactly who showed up when it counted. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, and Carol didn't have a retort. I wasn't done. To my daughter Judy, I continued, I leave the family photo albums and the piano. She always understood the quiet things I cared about. Judy finally looked up. Her eyes were glassy, and she nodded, just once, like she'd been holding her breath and could finally exhale. The rest of the will went into legal details, names of accounts, the bank information, the key to the safety deposit box, which, yes, had been entrusted to me. But none of that mattered at the table. What mattered was the message. Grandpa saw everything. The visits, the phone calls, the way Carol hijacked his funeral like she was planning a corporate fundraiser. The way Brad and Ashley showed up for holidays with empty hands and open wallets. He saw it all. I can't believe this, Carol muttered, finally sitting down like the air had been sucked out of her. He lost his mind. He must have. He was old. Confused. He was sharp until the end, I said. You would have known that if you'd spent time with him. Ashley scoffed. This is petty. This is vindictive. No, I said, folding the will and tucking it back into the envelope. This is closure. For him. And for me. The room sat in stunned silence. Even the kids, Ashley's twins, who'd been playing in the living room, must have sensed something, because the whole house just felt heavier. There was no more laughter. No more smug jokes. And then, after what felt like a long minute of no one breathing, Carol laughed. A single, dry laugh that didn't reach her eyes. You think you've won something, she said quietly, fixing me with a glare so sharp it could have cut glass. You think you're some kind of hero? This doesn't make you family, Daniel. It makes you an errand boy with a lucky break. He's gone, and you're nothing but the kid who warmed the bench while the adults lived real lives. That stung. Not because it was true, but because it wasn't. And deep down, I think she knew that. I stood up. I didn't come here to win anything. I came here because he asked me to. That's more than any of you can say. I could feel my heart thudding in my chest. Part of me wanted to leave right then, just walk out and never look back. But something told me this wasn't the final act. Not yet. There was still something lingering in the air. Unfinished business, maybe, or just years of resentment finally cracking through the surface. Carol looked like she wanted to scream. Brad was whispering something to Ashley, probably calculating how much the savings part of the will meant. Judy stood up slowly, walked over, and gently placed her hand on my arm. "I'm glad he had you," she said softly. "He needed someone. And you were there." That's when I realized this moment wasn't about the house or the money. It was about being seen, heard, acknowledged. And while Grandpa couldn't be there to defend me in person, he'd found a way to do it anyway. On his terms. In his voice. I glanced back at the table, the people who'd laughed when I walked in and fallen silent when I spoke. "I'm heading out," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "You can finish dinner without me." And as I turned to go, Brad's voice followed me. "You'll regret this, man. You think this is over?" "It's not over." I paused at the doorway, one hand on the knob. I didn't look back. Just said, "You're right. It's not." And it wasn't. Because what none of them knew yet was what else Grandpa left behind. I didn't look back as I stepped outside. The autumn air hit me like a reset button, crisp, quiet, real. My boots crunched on the gravel driveway as I walked to my car, heart still thudding from what just happened. I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and sat there in silence. The manila envelope with the will sat in my passenger seat, now closed, like a finished chapter. But I knew better. That wasn't the end of the story. That was just the prologue. On the drive home, I kept replaying the moment Carol stood and accused me of forging Grandpa's words. I couldn't stop hearing Brad's voice, low and threatening. "You'll regret this." As if he could do anything about it. Still, the words stuck to me like smoke. They weren't just mad about the inheritance. They were humiliated. And when people like Carol get embarrassed, they don't sulk, they scheme. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone had already started buzzing. 3 missed calls from Aunt Carol. A voicemail from Brad, slurred and angry. And a text from Ashley. "You think this is what Grandpa would have wanted? To tear the family apart?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked into my house, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at my kitchen table. I opened the envelope again and took out the second sheet Grandpa had included, one I hadn't read aloud. He titled it, "For After the Storm." It was a letter, handwritten, a little shaky, but still him. It started, "If you're reading this, kid, it means you did it. You faced them. I'm proud of you. Now it's time to finish what I started." The rest of the letter outlined instructions for a safe deposit box at First Federal Bank, the one downtown where he kept important documents. I hadn't even remembered that box until I saw the note. Grandpa wanted me to access it only after reading the will aloud, because, according to him, the truth only matters once the masks are off. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. The safe deposit box wasn't huge, but it was packed. Folders, envelopes, photos, receipts. At first, I thought it was just old paperwork. But the more I looked, the more I realized what Grandpa had done. He'd been keeping records. Letters, emails, printed copies of text messages, photos, audio transcripts. It was a treasure trove of receipts on our family. It wasn't malicious. It was intentional. Calculated. He'd been documenting patterns for years. Every time Carol pressured him for money under the guise of helping with bills, even when her vacation photos told another story. Every time Brad showed up asking for a loan he never paid back. The time Ashley borrowed one of his credit cards and forgot to mention it. Even Judy was mentioned, though more sympathetically, how she'd often taken Carol's side to keep the peace. It was like Grandpa had been building a case, not for court, but for clarity. For justice in the only way he knew how to give it after he was gone. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Tucked at the very bottom of the box was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a flash drive and a letter. "Daniel, if you decide to go through with this, and I think you will, you'll need this drive. It contains audio recordings. I started making them a couple of years ago, just to remember things better, but it turned out some of the conversations were worth saving, especially that last one with Carol. If they try to fight you, play it. Trust yourself. You're not alone anymore." My hands were shaking. I went home and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. There were 4 audio files, labeled with dates. I clicked on the most recent one. Carol's voice came through, sharp and unmistakable. "Come on, Dad, you owe us. Daniel is just a boy. What has he done for you, really? He doesn't have a family to take care of, we do. You're being unfair." Then Grandpa's voice, soft but firm. "What I owe is a choice, Carol. And I've made it. You don't get to bully me into guilt just because you want a bigger slice of a pie you didn't help bake." The conversation escalated, Carol pressing, Grandpa standing his ground. And finally, Carol said something I'll never forget. "Fine, do what you want. But don't be surprised when he turns on you too. That's what people like him do. They take, and when it's your time to need something back, they're not there." The recording ended with Grandpa sighing. "Maybe. Or maybe you've just never learned what it means to give without expecting applause." I sat there in stunned silence, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room. That recording was dynamite. Not just because it confirmed everything I already knew, but because it could prove it. If Carol tried to challenge the will, tried to smear my name, tried to take anything, I had the truth. I had his voice. And I knew Carol. She wouldn't let this go. She'd already started trying to rally the rest of the family, posting vague statuses on Facebook about betrayal, texting cousins I hadn't spoken to in years with half-truths and pity party rhetoric. Sure enough, 3 days later, I got a formal notice. Carol had hired a lawyer. She was contesting the will. Brad posted something passive-aggressive on Instagram about people who pretend to be family for a payday. Ashley unfollowed me. And Judy called me, crying. Said Carol was furious, said the whole family chat had exploded. Said she wished Grandpa hadn't dragged her into it, but she understood why he did. I told her the truth. He didn't drag anyone into anything. He just gave them the mirror. The lawyer Carol hired sent me a request for mediation. A formal challenge, citing undue influence and lack of mental capacity. They wanted to argue that Grandpa had been manipulated, that I'd coerced him somehow, that he wasn't of sound mind. I knew exactly how to respond. I sent over a full copy of the will, notarized. The timeline of visits, documented. The audio file. Everything Grandpa left behind. But that's not the moment it all blew up. That came later, at the mediation meeting itself. Because when Carol walked into that room, confident and composed, she had no idea what I was about to play for the whole table. And that is where everything started to unravel. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in a sleek office building downtown, one of those glassy towers where the walls are too clean and the smiles too rehearsed. I showed up early, dressed in a plain button-up and jeans, just like Grandpa would have wanted. No pretense, just presence. Carol showed up 10 minutes late, of course. Hair perfectly sprayed, lips pursed like she was about to host a charity gala, not contest her father's final wishes. Brad swaggered in behind her, wearing sunglasses indoors like he thought he was somebody, and Ashley followed, flipping through her phone with the detached boredom of someone used to being heard without speaking. They barely glanced at me, but I watched them closely, especially Carol. She gave me this tight, dismissive smile like we were playing a game she'd already won. The mediator, a calm, gray-haired woman named Eleanor, got straight to it. She welcomed us, outlined the agenda, and asked if anyone wanted to speak before she began reviewing the will. Carol cleared her throat. "I just want to say, for the record," she said, folding her hands in front of her like she was about to deliver a sermon, "that this situation is deeply unfortunate. My father was a good man, but in his later years, he was easily confused, and Daniel, while well-meaning, I'm sure, may have unintentionally influenced him. We're not here to accuse anyone. We just want fairness." I nearly laughed. She was good, polished, calculated. But I knew the truth, and more importantly, I had proof. Eleanor nodded. "Thank you, Carol. Daniel, do you have a response?" I pulled the flash drive from my jacket pocket and slid it across the table. "Yes. Before we talk about fairness, I think everyone here should hear what Grandpa had to say. In his own words." Carol's smile faltered for half a second. Brad raised an eyebrow. Ashley actually looked up from her phone. The mediator took the drive, plugged it into a speaker, and hit play. Grandpa's voice filled the room. "Come on, Dad, you owe us. Daniel is just a boy. What has he done for you, really? He doesn't have a family to take care of, we do. You're being unfair. What I owe is a choice, Carol. And I've made it. You don't get to bully me into guilt just because you want a bigger slice of a pie you didn't help bake." Carol's face froze. The entire 5-minute clip played without interruption. Grandpa's calm, deliberate voice. Carol's entitlement. Her attempt to manipulate him. Her telling line, "Don't be surprised when he turns on you too." When it ended, the silence was almost painful. Carol stood up abruptly. "This is out of context. You're all just listening to a cherry-picked conversation." "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "It's the moment he decided. You're hearing the exact reason he rewrote the will." Eleanor cleared her throat gently. "Carol, your claim of undue influence is substantially weakened by this recording. Legally, your father's mental clarity is affirmed by both the notarized documents and his articulation in this audio. Unless you have hard evidence to the contrary, this case will not hold." Brad leaned forward, confused. "Wait, so he really left everything to him? That's it?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "The home, the savings, the car, and all personal possessions were left to Daniel. It's legally binding." Ashley folded her arms, muttering, "This is ridiculous." I looked at all three of them, people who had laughed around the table while casually voting me out of the family, who had spoken over Grandpa, dismissed him, taken and taken and taken until there was nothing left but obligation. And now, finally, they had to sit with the consequences. Carol tried one last time. "I raised this family," she said sharply. "I sacrificed. I gave up everything to keep this family together, and this is what I get." "No," I said, my voice steady, calm. "You get exactly what he thought you deserved." She stared at me, rage simmering behind her eyes. But she had nothing left to say. The meeting ended shortly after. No further challenges. No appeals. Just bitter silence and defeated glares as Carol gathered her things and stormed out. Brad and Ashley followed, silent for once. I walked out last. Not because I was lingering, because I was letting it settle. It took a few weeks for the dust to fully clear. I moved into Grandpa's house, not to parade anything, but because it was my home too. I planted fresh marigolds out front, fixed the squeaky gate, even kept his old recliner in the living room. Judy came by sometimes. Quietly, without saying much, just to sit and share coffee like we used to with Grandpa. Carol tried to save face with the rest of the family, but the audio leaked. Not by me. I kept it private. But Judy had heard it, and apparently so did a few other relatives who decided not to show up for Thanksgiving next year. That golden image Carol had carefully curated? It cracked. And once cracks show, they only spread. As for me, I didn't feel victorious. Not exactly. It wasn't about the money or the house. It was about Grandpa, about honoring him, and standing my ground when it would have been easier to disappear. In the end, I didn't have to win. I just had to show up like I always did. And that made all the difference.